Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to today's webinar on engineering management challenges and opportunities. I'm Arjun and I'll be your host for today. Let us just briefly introduce ourselves. We are MLA College. We are specialists in distance learning programs, and all our programs are awarded by the University of Plymouth. We've got a range of partnerships with renowned institutions globally, such as UNITAR, such as BIMTech, etc. And we essentially specialize in empowering learners across the world through high quality, flexible education. That is our core aim. Before we begin, I'd just like to give you a brief run through of our webinar today, which is we'll explore key topics in this domain with our speakers. We'll run two audience polls in which we'd love to hear your views on on contemporary trends surrounding engineering management. And finally, we'd wrap it up with a Q&A session in which we'd like to address your questions, especially those pertaining to the topic being discussed today. And therefore, I strongly encourage you to participate freely. Let me just introduce the two of our speakers today. Firstly, hi, Professor John Chudley. Welcome to the webinar. Professor John Chudley is an accomplished engineer with a PhD in marine technology. He's held senior roles in academia as well as professional bodies. And at present, he is the chair of the Engineering Council. He brings extensive experience in engineering education, vocational pathways, and professional standards. We're glad to have you on board, sir.
Thank you.
I would also like to introduce Dr. Paul Folan, who's a senior lecturer at MLA College, and he has a strong background in engineering management, sustainability, as well as leadership. His core work throughout his professional career has generally revolved around leading engineering departments, as well as designing innovative programs to help professionals in bridging the gap between their technical expertise, as well as combining that with managerial responsibilities and finding the golden mean of the two. So welcome to the webinar, Dr. Paul Folan.
Thanks, Arjun. It's good to be here.
Lovely to have you two on board. Let's just dive in. Firstly, John, I'd like to address the first question to you. It seems that there is a key issue in the engineering environment at present, which is recruitment and retention. In your opinion, what do you believe are the main challenges that engineering employees face today in terms of both attracting as well as retaining skilled staff?
Thank you, Arjun, and it's always nice to start with an easy question. So yeah, thank you very much for that. It is a huge topic, and I think it's a generational thing, and it's actually a global thing. I think what I want to do, perhaps I'll just consider two parts, and that's about the sort of maybe access into engineering and recruitment, but then also because of what we're talking about today about a bit about the mid-career and retention. I mean, I think we've seen a significant shift in young people in schools and the approach, and I think there's an issue with the standing of engineering. I mean, I think particularly in the UK, it does change around the globe in different countries, but I think in this in the UK, the perception of engineering is probably still quite dated. And one of the things I'm quite keen to push is that engineering is actually a profession. You know, in the same standing as a medical, as a doctor, as an accountant, as a, you know, and you know, we'll talk about it more later, but professional registration, for instance, I'm a chartered engineer. And I think those things are really important, that engineering is a profession. It varies hugely, again, as Paul will talk about later across subjects, and particularly now with AI and additive manufacturing and all these exciting things actually coming on board. So it's changing so rapidly as well. I think schools, government have started to address some of this. You know, we've seen that T-levels have been coming in at school, which I hope will make people more aware of this, because we seem to have over the past few years considered the only way into any career is you do your GCSEs at school, and at 16 you go and do A-levels, and at 18 you go and do a degree. That doesn't suit everyone. And it is a route into engineering, but it's not the only route. And the problem we've seen is that I think the apprenticeship offer at 16 has now been seen as a failed A-level route. And that's a great shame, because it's a fantastic route into engineering where you get all the vocational aspects, and you also get alongside that, you get competency. So it's not just knowledge and understanding, because you want occupational competence and professional competence, and the apprenticeship route does that. I think the T levels are a sticking plaster on that, and I think we need to sort out the 16 to 18-year-old or 16 to 20-year-old apprenticeship offer, which has declined over the past few years. And I think we've got to get that standing. If you want to be an engineer, you can at least go at 16 with fantastic GCSEs, do an apprenticeship, go on and do a higher apprenticeship or a part-time degree, and actually become a professionally registered engineer by your mid to late 20s, which is probably faster. You can do it through a traditional academic route. So I think we have to look at this perception of engineering and the fact that it is a profession. There is a role of Engineering UK. Engineering UK is a body in the UK, and it does promote engineering careers to young people in schools through they operate a Tomorrow's Engineers scheme, and there's the Big Bang Fair that is held annually at the NEC, and I think this has gone a long way to helping to transform that perception of engineering. And also they did a poll actually last year to young people, because it was, does professional registration matter to young people? Because generally the Big Bang Fair has just promoted engineering sectors. And they did this, and it was a bit of a straw poll with a small amount of young people. But nearly 40% came up with that, oh, if I knew I could come be professionally registered and that engineering was a profession, it would make me more likely to consider engineering as a career. So again, I think there's things around that. Mid-career, the main thing there is that, of course, because of the lack of personnel, that I think it's quite a market where people can actually move from one company to another to better themselves. And I think, that is an issue because, of course, the pipeline's not coming through, so the skills that are actually required of people are in demand. And we see that actually quite a lot. So retention for individual companies is quite difficult. And I think, we have to get the pipeline of young people coming into engineering to actually address that for companies. I think as well, we do lose people to other sectors. And I think that's where the professional registration actually comes in. If we can get employers in particular, as well as individuals, to value professional registration and continuing professional development around that, and having their staff become engineering technician or incorporated engineer or chartered engineer, which is all about public safety at the end of the day. And, the perception of the public that these are professional engineers working for those companies, understanding that, I think, will help people stay. Probably slightly another topic, but there is a gender balance as well. There's a lack of women in engineering. I think professionally registered, we're lower than 10%, which is not a good position to be. And we do lose a number of professional registered women around mid-30s, and we have to look at ways we attract back into the industry those that take career breaks. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's very complex. But I think it starts with the young people and the perception of engineering and the opportunities to what a wonderful career engineering can bring, through to the standing of professional registration for mid-career professionals, allowing them to develop into senior management and other opportunities.
Thank you, John, for your answer. I think, the core gist that, as you've highlighted in your answer, being a paradigm shift in terms of viewing engineering as a profession, and how that sort of shift can attract a lot more youth towards entering the engineering pipeline in the first place, can certainly play a key role towards the issue of attracting as well as retaining talent. I would also like to turn to Paul now, because as I can see, and as I mentioned earlier, that a lot of your key role has revolved around the evolving role of engineers as they progress in their careers, right? And the sort of skill set changes that they undergo as they say transition from strictly technical to incorporating managerial responsibilities as well, right? So could you perhaps shed more light on this?
Yeah. I'm just reflecting on what John just had to say as well, and I see what John talks about, the challenges for employers in recruitment and retention of staff. These are also opportunities for the mid-career professionals that might be out there as well. And I think the sort of this message that is emerging of the increased need for upskilling staff, and possibly some of the viewers out there will have experiences of their line managers or the people senior in the organization coming to them, asking them how they want to develop themselves or continual professional development opportunities, and how they can take up further opportunities within the organization, possibly further up the management chain. More than likely, the overall idea for the companies out there is to move trusted people up the career ladder, and let's say new entrants coming in, maybe from universities or other academic routes, come in and do those sorts of jobs that they might currently be doing. So I suppose some people might see that as a bit of a threat, but there's also an opportunity there as well. And we continuously see publications coming out from, I was doing my homework before we started this webinar, and I was looking at the IET have a number of publications about the need for upskilling. We have increased digitalization, for example, the Internet of Things, all these sorts of things. And there is a range of challenges for today's engineers that might necessarily have been covered in their original degrees way back when they studied in the academic context, and they might hit a wall in terms of their career progression if they kind of supplement the kind of skill set that they currently have. Now, this might be as much a kind of a confidence thing. I should make that point, as it is about kind of educational attainment. But there is certainly a need for greater kind of management skills, leadership skills are seen as increasingly important. And a number of studies that have been carried out kind of bears this kind of issue out. The traditional view of an engineering graduate coming into a job doing, say, a number of years, say 3 or 4 years in a particular role or a small range of roles, learning those skills and then moving up the career ladder. That's still there, but the sorts of skill sets that these engineers are being asked to kind of bring into their portfolio and being able to handle going forward is increasing, I think. There's things like team management skills, there's increased leadership kind of expectations on engineers, greater expectations on engineers to actually manage and not stay within the kind of the comfort of the technical confines of what they're used to, but to move out of that scape.
Well, thank you, Paul, for kind of shedding a light on how, say, upskilling, incorporating emerging, say, trends and how the associated skills can be a key part of career progression, as well as incorporating more leadership skills, more managerial skills as they progress onto bigger and greater roles. Managing, say, more and more people can be a key part of, say, the career trajectory that an engineer might undergo. So based on John having shared about the issues in attracting and retaining talent, as well as you mentioning how there can be, say, a change in skill set and how that can have impacts in terms of the roles as well as the associated skills for engineering professionals, I'd just like to launch a poll for the audience in terms of what they believe is the biggest challenge today in terms of engineering recruitment. So I've just launched the poll and we'd love to hear your opinion on this.
It's interesting to see the picture change as people come in and vote.
So I'm just winding up the poll in 5 seconds. And the results are as follows. So 50%, half of the attendees have stated that the core challenge in, say, engineering recruitment today is skill shortage in emerging technology, followed by retention of experienced professional. And we've had one person who voted for competition from other sectors. So firstly, I think that an interpretation of the poll is a very good follow through to this. So I'd like to turn to you, John, first. It seems that the outcomes of this poll seem to align very closely with a lot of contemporary industry reports, such as, say, Make UK's industrial strategy, as well as IET skills for a digital future. So could you share your thoughts on how these challenges could reflect the evolving demands of engineering profession?
Yeah, it's interesting, is it? I'm not surprised. It's a relatively small number, but the percentages are probably the way I would have expected it. And skill shortages and emerging technologies, are key. If we look down here in the southwest, we've got the potential of an offshore wind development in the Celtic Sea, and the skills aren't here in the southwest. Not in the numbers that are actually required. So I mean, that is absolutely key, and I think we have to, through education and training, rapidly put in requirements to support these industries as they come along. Plus, we need to look at retraining and upskilling. And an important thing of being professionally registered is that you have to undertake continuing professional development to stay as a registered professional engineer, chartered engineer, incorporated engineer. I think that's important as well. And you can see that the retention of experienced professionals coming in at number 2 there it kind of follows, because if you're a company and their expertise is required and the offer is greater somewhere else, then potentially you're going to lose that person. And that's where perhaps competition from other sectors come in. I do think it's a shame it got 0% on lack of diversity and inclusion, because I think we've got a lot of work to do in that to enhance our engineering workforce. But if I'm looking at that, it's probably the ranking I would have expected.
For me, Arjun, the poll is also as expected. I mean, we see an increasing range of advanced technologies emerging. Industry 4.0 is here to stay, and all of the different tools and techniques that are built on that kind of platform. There are so many out there that are used by engineers and all sorts of professionals within industry, and getting a grip on these through traditional educational courses such as engineering degrees. You might touch on these, but you mightn't necessarily have a very deep understanding of any of these tools. You might have heard of them, but you mightn't have got much opportunity to play around with them and in anger before you actually see them in industry. So there's definitely a kind of need, I think, there within kind of academia to try and help to fill that kind of gap. So digitalization and advanced automation also falls in there. I think an emerging trend is also sustainability. And possibly everyone out there listening or watching us have probably heard more and more about kind of this concept of sustainability emerging into their jobs. There's the new reporting requirements that are emerging from many companies now, ESG reporting. So that's looking at kind of environmental stewardship and social responsibility and corporate governance within any organization, large or small. And this has been rolled out to more and more companies into the future. And we should expect more and more engineers are going to be drawn into this process to help to report back their company's performance on these sorts of aspects, as the public kind of is very, very interested in these areas. So I think those sorts of skills are starting to emerge as well, and getting the kind of experience, people with the requisite experience, the lived experience, shall we say, in companies, but also coming in with some sort of educational background which sets them up to get that experience is going to be so important. As John said, the lack of diversity inclusion votes is a shame. It is definitely one that needs to be kind of addressed. We cannot continue to have such low levels of participation from whole sections of the potential public that could be engineers out there. We need to kind of address that definitely.
Thank you, John and Paul, for sharing your insights of what these polls indicate. I'm sure a lot of attendees can gain insights as well as relate to a lot of, the knowledge being shared by you. I'd like to turn to you now, John, as chair of the Engineering Council. Could you please walk us through the registration process? How is it exactly structured? And say the changing demands that you've highlighted previously, how does this process exactly address that?
Okay, thank you, Arjun. Perhaps you could put the slide up that I've actually produced to help with this. I should just start saying that the Engineering Council is the UK regulatory body that actually licensed the professional engineering institutions to do this on its behalf. So there are 39 professional engineering institutions at present. My own institution is the Institute of Marine Engineering, Science and Technology. So, for instance, I'm a fellow of IMREST, and that is where I actually obtained my chartered engineer through the IMREST under license from the Engineering Council. So, what we're looking, the important thing, just while Arjun's actually putting that up, I was just trying to demonstrate a staircase of professional development and how that relates to professional registration. I think it's important to say this is not an Engineering Council slide. This is a slide I developed a number of years ago while Director of the National Apprenticeship Service when we were looking at developing higher apprenticeships. But it stands because I think, as I said earlier when I was talking about routes into the engineering profession, we seem to think and only value the more academic route. And it's important to state that the Engineering Council values all routes to professional registration, and they can be demonstrated in a number of ways. So if you're doing the traditional academic route and you're looking at the left-hand side of that diagram, yes, you can do the A-levels. And then, yes, you can go through and you can do an integrated MEng, and that will give you all the knowledge and understanding requirements for professional registration at various levels. However, you can't become professionally registered until one, you're aligned with a professional engineering institution, a professional body, but also you have competence and commitment to demonstrate. So it's a holistic approach. So if anyone wants to be specific, I don't demonstrate it. I happen to have a book here, but this is the UK Standard for Professional Engineering Competence and Commitment, UK Spec. That is the Bible that will show you how to do and what you need to demonstrate. But in essence, it's valuing not just knowledge and understanding, but occupational and professional competence as well. And I think it's important, we tend, because of the academic route that we value, everyone that comes out of the academic route, we tend to term early career, but of course, in my mind, they're not early career. The early career are the people doing the apprenticeship at level 2, level 3 in what they're doing. And that's about terminology, again, in valuing all routes to professional registration. We also, it might surprise you when you're looking at that step on, step off type of approach. And I think as higher education changes over the coming years, the concept of doing a 4-year degree, yes, it will remain in a number of universities, but not in 150 universities. I think we have to diversify and look at the way we do things. For instance, MLA College offers, you might hear more later about postgraduate diploma and MSc top-ups through distance learning, where people can take modules when it suits them in their workplace. And I think that will change, and the traditional 3-year degree you will see perhaps you'll see other innovative approaches where micro-credentials come and you actually build these things up. So rather than looking at a degree as being 3 years or 4 years, what you might look at is someone in a workplace who can progress over a period of years. And they can step on and step off that staircase as you see there. So they could have a route to Eng Tech. They could then have a route to incorporated engineer, and then they could have a route to chartered engineer. Rather than at the minute, everyone that does the traditional academic route, they wait until they can become a chartered engineer, not valuing all the levels of professional registration. And to help that, the Engineering Council at the minute, as part of its strategic plan, is actually undertaking a review. It's a registration review working group, actually looking at our register and is it fit for purpose. And I think that's important, because if you look there on the right-hand side, there's a big gap between Eng Tech and iEng. Do we need more steps? Do we need to move the steps so as people can feel that there's achievable steps as a professionally registered engineer and as they develop their career? Is there room on the professional register for what we would call advancement around the technician route rather than what is seen as the engineer route? So the Engineering Council are looking at this all at the moment, but as it stands, it's what you're seeing there. There are the 3 professional registration levels, and they're aligned at the moment, as you can see at I should have said the level 2 to 7 are the academic framework levels in the UK, but that's explained more under UK spec as well. But the important thing is, I feel, to get young people into apprenticeships as well, valuing that route, and when they've undertaken their level 3 apprenticeship, for some of the more mature people listening, that would have been what we called the technician apprenticeship, that they become registrable as Eng Tech. And so they don't think about the engineering as a job. They start immediately thinking about it as a profession, and then value all the routes that would allow them to go from Eng Tech to incorporated engineer and chartered engineer. I hope that helped.
Thank you for sharing on that, John. As you mentioned that the UK spec framework plays a key role in terms of, say, understanding and orienting how one can, say, register and gain gain professional recognition in this regard. So I would just like to turn the question to Paul, that certain aspects of the spec framework, especially by people in their mid-career level, mid-career professionals, consider to be extremely challenging. So could you perhaps
Yeah.
shed more light on these areas and how these challenges could be addressed?
Yeah. So the UK spec, of course, has kind of 5 areas. You have knowledge and understandings at the top. You have design, development, and solving engineering problems. There's responsibility, management, and leadership, which is possibly the one that people will find difficult or difficult to evidence, maybe. Communication and interpersonal skills is an area as well, and professional commitment. It's probably the kind of latter 3 areas, Arjun, that typically, and I'm making a big generic assumption, generalization here, that engineers typically struggle most with. The first 2 they're probably more comfortable with because that's probably the day job, or they do it on a regular basis to their work, and they can easily kind of show evidence of actually doing these sorts of things. It's when you get down to things such as personal commitment, where you have to seek evidence of understanding codes of conduct, for example, or looking at the kind of safety of particular systems and the implications of those systems. Looking at this, I mentioned the concept of sustainability earlier on, how that might play a role in your work going forward. Kind of that can be more intangible, if I can put it that way, and trying to get evidence that's specific enough and to be able to write about that can be difficult for some applicants, for example. So that can be a bit of a challenge for some people. The topics we mentioned already, such as kind of leadership and kind of showing that you have responsibility and management, hopefully mid-career professionals will they typically start picking up these skills, or shall I say these work roles, their kind of seniors start to delegate these tasks to them, so they can start to kind of acquire a kind of a list of these skills that they can talk about on the kind of their application forms when they're applying against each one of the UK spec kind of elements. But that's typically what's involved. So workplace kind of collection of data and evidence in these areas. Sometimes it's easy, but there's other areas where there's kind of gaps missing, and there can be a role for kind of education there as well to help show that you're kind of filling in those gaps if you cannot necessarily or readily kind of fill them in from the workplace. So that's kind of key as well.
Thank you for shedding more light on that, Paul. At the end, you mentioned that education can also play a key role in terms of, say, both professional recognition as well as career advancement. MLA College offers a postgraduate diploma in engineering management, which seems extremely relevant to our conversation at hand. So I'd just like to ask you, how do you believe this program can, say, meet these needs while ensuring that, career advancement is not ignored either, while the individual is undergoing the educational program?
Yeah, we it's interesting. Many of the topics that we talked about, Arjun, kind of really inform the kind of construction of the program that is currently underdeveloped here at MLA College. It's up and running, but the modules are appearing as and when they're needed. I'll talk about the modules in a minute, but just to kind of talk a little bit around the background to the program, we were very conscious of the role and position of those mid-career professionals that might be out there listening to us today, and the sorts of potential challenges they might have. Now, engineers, of course, work in different sectors, they're different companies, they're facing different engineering challenges. But a lot of the same sorts of problems emerge again and again when these very experienced professionals they hit a barrier, and kind of giving them maybe the confidence, as I talked about before, but also the kind of educational attainment that they might need to top up on, giving them those opportunities to develop further skills can be very important for career progression. So that was kind of some of the key kind of thinking behind the program itself. So we developed this 120 credits PG DIP in engineering management run by MLA College. So we have the 7 modules, Arjun, in the course. We have 3 compulsory modules. The kind of first module looks at sustainable production systems. And so it kind of looks at this concept of sustainability and incorporating that into our classic understanding of how production systems are developed and operated. We also, the second module looks at kind of this topic of managing people and kind of in a global organization, or where there's a different organizational cultures wherever you are in the world, and bringing in concepts of leadership and how you develop team building skills and management aspects within that. So you have a kind of a good range there. The third module looks at management science aspects, so it's one for the engineers. There's some maths in there as well, so the engineering students are well catered for there. Then we reach a fork in the road, shall we speak. The students are given 4 options, and they can choose which ones best suit them, because every engineer will be different and every kind of student will have different challenges within their organization or want to develop themselves in different ways. So we offer a module on strategy and accounting and finance. Often this is a bugbear for many students. They don't like doing finance and accountancy, but it comes up again and again as you go up the career ladder. There's no avoiding it. So there's an opportunity to do that. We look at logistics and supply chain management in greater detail. Lean and agile enterprises, which is a formation that we see more and more companies kind of adopting. And we have a module on project management as well. So these options are all available to students to choose. And of course, what they choose is very much dependent on where they want to go or what challenges they see within their individual workplace.
Well, thank you for shedding light on the program, Paul, and say how practically it has been designed to ensure that there's not just say incorporation of the technical expertise based on the subject matter of interest for the applicant, but as well as say incorporation of soft skills, of leadership skills, etc., so that it fully complements their transition to say higher levels of management. So in that regard, it appears to be an extremely practical program for working professionals.
Yeah, I would say it's specifically designed with engineers in mind. I know many of my colleagues in previous existences have gone off and done things like MBAs and things like that. They're very useful as well, but they mightn't necessarily be focused on kind of the engineering aspect, and they can be very generalistic, and sometimes that can they kind of the key skills that engineers bring to the table. And we must remember engineering degree is a really, really valuable thing, and it brings so many problem solving skills to the table. There's a lot of repetition they might find in many kind of MBAs. So kind of focusing on engineering management specifically, and the key word there being engineer, in engineering as part of that package, allows us to kind of tailor the program more towards the kind of engineering students that we hope to kind of attract to the course.
Perhaps sorry, if you don't mind me just adding as well, I think the development, the important thing with MLA College is looking to the future of the way we feel higher education will go in the sort of concept of micro-credentials, in the way these modules are developed via distance learning. You can take a break if your career means that I think Paul said this earlier, but just wanted to reinforce that, because I think this is important, that you're not taking time out, and you don't have to you don't have to complete it in a set amount of time. So if you're lucky enough to get a promotion, you can take a break for 6 months or whatever, and then come back and do another module as is required. And again, I think that's the way we're going to see flexible higher education work in the future, particularly from a distance learning perspective.
Thank you for adding on to that, John. you'd brought up previously, you'd explain, say, the registration process, the step-by-step approach towards getting, say, membership of the engineering council, as well as how professional recognition can play a key role in terms of professional development. So we've just had a very relevant question from a member of the audience, which is that how does, say, having, say, a chartered engineer status, how does that help them in their global career mobility?
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. I'd say a lot, but that's the very short answer. The Engineering Council signs up to a number of accords across the globe for this, and it's of course the Engineering Council is a UK regulatory body, but operates in a global context. And the important thing at the minute, the professional engineering institutions have certain agreements with countries, but the Engineering Council is working on something that's more generic. And back in September, the Engineering Council signed a mutual recognition agreement with the United States. I should say it's not the USA. You can't sign an agreement with the USA. You have to sign with every individual state. But I think we're now up to 27 of the 50 states that represents over the 70% of the GDP of the US. So that allows the chartered engineer to be recognized within those states and the professional engineer within those states to be recognized in the UK. And now the Engineering Council is looking to roll out that mutual recognition agreement model to other countries. So I think professional registration is key to mobility. And it's key to companies and organizations that operate globally as well. And if you're in a company with offices in various countries, you want that engineer to be recognized, across that. So like I say, the Engineering Council is working hard on MRAs with key countries that will benefit UK PLC, as well as the individual, and also the professional engineering institutions work on that as well, because they very much have a global approach in their work.
Thank you for shedding more light on that, John. I think that would give a lot of insight to how that really aids in, say, having more opportunities worldwide, as well as owing to the enhanced recognition of the status. It really helps them, say, take the next leap in their career trajectory.
That's correct.
So I'd like to turn to Paul, because you talked about this previously, and a question has just come in very relevant to this, which is, say, how can mid-career professionals demonstrate sufficient experience for chartership if their work has been more generalized or, say, outside traditional engineering roles?
That's a good question. I think there is a perception out there sometimes, and it's an unfortunate perception, that if the work that you do is not strictly within a kind of an engineering pigeonhole, a recognizable engineering pigeonhole, that it's somehow invalidated for the purposes of applications. And John can speak stronger on this than me, but I know from my own experiences that there's a lot of things that we do outside of necessarily the kind of the strict engineering kind of problem solving that we do maybe on a day-to-day basis, that allows us to that can be fully incorporated into our application forms. The UK spec is written in quite a kind of generic form. It does have specific areas. I mentioned 5 areas, but within those areas, they're broken down in further detail, and that gives the potential applicant lots of kind of scope to bring in outside perspectives as well, ones that they might necessarily think are relevant, but which if they can what's the word I'm looking for? They can refit them, or they can rework them into something that will fit in very adequately and very nicely, and demonstrate to those assessors that they are meeting the competency in question. Okay.
Thank you for that, Paul. John, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I think it's quite important, this, in that it comes back to what I was saying around valuing all routes to professional registration. We've moved away. There was a number of years ago, to be professionally registered, you would have had to have had an MEng, a master's. That has changed, and that terminology is no longer used because it was realised that there are lots of people who come through apprenticeship route that potentially could not be professionally registered as a chartered engineer. And there are lots of ways to do that. So, for instance, we have set up MLA with a professional body, something in an overseas country where we look at knowledge and understanding, we look at occupational competence, and we look at professional competence, where we all do our own bit. So MLA College does a knowledge and understanding, the company does occupational competence, and the professional body does professional competence. But the important thing is recognition in all of those levels. So, for instance, you don't have to do an MSc. You could do a work-based project that demonstrates master's level learning through experiential learning or others. I'm just sort of really adding to what Paul has said. There are a number of ways to do that. And so what I'd recommend, people who are perhaps looking at professional registration and perhaps don't have what would be seen as the traditional, in quotes, I want to get past there being any traditional normal route. Like I say, there are a number of routes. But, you know, if they haven't got that normal A-level degree, but they're working at a senior level within a company, is to have a conversation with the professional engineering institution and the mentors within that PEI, where they can look at valuing and can put through whatever technique in UK spec that they'll be able to demonstrate all those A to E requirements. And there are a number of ways to do that, but please approach the professional engineering institution that is relevant to you and indeed your employer.
Thank you for shedding more light on that, John. I think that gives a lot of insight to people who may outside. Again, you're saying that there is no, say, standardized traditional route per se, but then again, what people might consider a traditional route, I think it gives a lot of insight to people being able to approach the council for professional recognition, even if they believe that they might not have like a strict academic path leading up to it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Professor John Chudley and Dr. Paul Folan, for joining us today and sharing your insights on both challenges as well as opportunities in the domain of engineering management. I'd just like to inform everyone that, say, apart from the postgraduate diploma in engineering management, MLA College offers a wide range of other programs in maritime sustainability as well as other domains, all of which are there on our website.